Ladies and gentlemen, welcome into the first edition of the College Football Playoff 12-team bracket that was revealed. This is just the first one. It is maybe a little bit confusing. I'll explain to everyone how it works, but the general sense here is that, I'll tell you what, I do think they are going to have to adjust the seed lines and potentially not give an automatic bye to all four of the Power Four conferences, because all four of the Power Four conferences are not equal. We know that. We know the Big Ten and the SEC are better than the ACC and the Pac-12. But right now, every single conference gets an auto bye, and that's why you've got a BYU, who's actually the number 9 overall team right now, ranked. They're getting an auto bye. So when it comes to this, you do have the number 1 overall team getting a bye. It is Oregon. Not surprising at all. They beat Ohio State. They're the number 1 team in the AP. I think they're consensus number 1. And they end up getting a bye. They'd be playing at a neutral site. That's the quarterfinal games are at a neutral site. The first round is on campus. So Oregon, they're the number 1 overall team. Nobody's surprised. They get the number 1 overall seed. Now, the number 2 ranked team is Ohio State. But because Ohio State is blocked by Oregon, they would be in the first round. And this is just the way it works, because every team or one team from every conference, the conference champion, gets the auto bye. You could even argue Ohio State, this is not that bad of a draw. You get a Boise State at home, that's an on-campus game, and then you get BYU neutral site. I mean, that's a good draw, you would think. But when it comes to Ohio State and Oregon debating about this, they're likely to meet again in the Big Ten championship, and the winner of that will then be the auto bye into the quarterfinals. Unless Ohio State somehow loses to Indiana. Indiana still is undefeated. We'll have to see what they do against Michigan, because Indiana has Michigan, then Ohio State, and then I think they have, I don't know what I think they might only have one game after that. But Ohio State right now, the number 2 overall team, but they're the 5 seed because they're knocked out there by Oregon. Oregon beat them. They're in the same conference. Ohio State can't get a bye because Oregon has the bye right now. The number 3 overall team is Georgia. They would be the 2 seed, the best team in the SEC. Right now, the SEC kind of seems like a mosh pit. Georgia struggled with Florida this past week, but I would agree. The win on the road at Texas was really good, and right now they're the best team in the SEC. So even though with the loss to Alabama, Bama's lost a few games, but losing to Bama on the road is not the worst thing in the world. It's not a terrible loss or anything like that. So the problem with Georgia is Carson Beck throwing interceptions. Moving on to the number 3 overall seed, the 3 seed, they're ranked 4th. It's Miami. So Miami would be the team from the ACC. The ACC is really weak right now. Miami, they've had a few very close games. They do have a nice explosive offense. They're the best team in the ACC. So they're going to be there. They are undefeated. And then you also do have BYU, who is undefeated as well. But they are the number 9 overall team ranked. They're the 4 seed because a team from the Big 12 does automatically get a bye into that quarterfinal. And right now, BYU, they are the best team in the Big 12 record-wise. And also you take a look at them in terms of their ranking at number 9. That's why they would be that team right there. So kind of interesting. Ohio State potentially facing BYU in the second round in this. But honestly, I don't think that really has much of a chance of happening, because of Ohio State. Ohio State is either going to be very likely the number 1 overall seed or probably like a 6 or a 7 seed, because if they lose to Oregon again, I don't think they're going to get that 5 seed, which is what everyone wants. Everyone's going to want the 5, because then you'll very likely get the group of 5 team. Now, who knows, if Boise State wins out and they blow teams out, Boise State might move up from 12, because Boise State's only loss is on the road at Oregon by 3 points in a game in which Oregon got 2 special teams touchdowns. So Boise State, yeah, they're not going to have many quality wins being in the Mountain West, but it's something to keep track of. But so that is the Miami is the number 4, BYU slides in, or Miami's the number 3, BYU's at number 4, Ohio State is the number 5 seed, but they're ranked 2nd. The number 6 seed would be Texas, but they're ranked 5th. So Texas, they've been wobbly. You lose to Georgia. Not the best resume for Texas. They've had a weird situation with Ewers being banged up in and out of the lineup. Arch Manning, people calling for Ewers to be benched. But right now, Texas, they are still in the playoff as the number 6. This is very annoying to go through. I'm sorry. It's just so confusing with these seeds. So they're the number 6 seed, but they're ranked 5th. I mean, you can understand it, but it's just like, next you do have Penn State, who's the number 7 seed, but they're ranked 6th. So Penn State, you lose to Ohio State. They've got an easy schedule, they do, but if they go 11-1, they'll make it. If they go 10-2, I think they're gonna be out. They just don't have a good enough schedule. You that week 1 game against West Virginia on the road. West Virginia is no good. It's not a good non-conference game. People thought West Virginia might be a little bit better this year. So Penn State, I think, has to win out. You lose to Ohio State at home. You lost by 7 points. It is what it is. But if Penn State wins out, they will make the playoff. And they're the 7th seed right now. Tennessee is the 8th seed. Boy, Tennessee's offense has really been hit or miss. They did beat Alabama. That's a huge win. So right now they are the 8th seed. You do have Indiana as the 9 seed. People were complaining that Indiana should be a little bit higher. The problem is they just have no good wins, like literally 0 good wins. 0 teams remotely close to being inside the top 25 in terms of wins for Indiana. Their best win is like a 3-loss team, I think. So Indiana's going to face Ohio State. This week they face Michigan. Michigan this year isn't that good, but still, they face Michigan. Then they face Ohio State the next week on the road. And we'll have to see how good Indiana is at that point. If they beat Ohio State, then they'll be facing Oregon in the Big Ten Championship. So you do have Indiana as the number 9 seed. The number 10 seed is Notre Dame. So Notre Dame, if they win out, they're going to be in. If you are Notre Dame, you would love to somehow get to that 5 line to be the 5 seed. But I don't think it's going to happen because Notre Dame does not have a conference championship. So that they, no matter what, they cannot get a bye. Even if they went 12-0, they wouldn't have a bye because the conference championship winners, they're the only ones that have the reserved bye. So Notre Dame, the best that they can do is a 5 seed to face a group of 5 at home. But right now in here, they'd be on the road at Penn State, which is not a great matchup for them. So Notre Dame, if they win, I mean, Notre Dame's schedule, they did schedule good teams, but it's just like USC's been terrible. They've got them last game. That's the rivalry game. FSU's been horrible. They play FSU this week. They did have a potential decent game against, Navy. Could that be a quality win? Probably not now. Navy lost to Rice, and Navy's going to lose a few more games, I'm guessing. They've got like South Florida. I think they face North Texas, or I think Army faces North Texas. But Notre Dame needs to hope that Army wins out, and then when Notre Dame beats Army, Army will still be ranked if Army only has 1 loss, because Notre Dame does not have a strong schedule. Notre Dame's really lucky that Texas A&M is where they are. I know Texas A&M got crushed by South Carolina. I think Texas A&M's totally fraudulent. I'm surprised Texas A&M was even considered, because to be fair, they only had that 1 loss and then they got crushed by South Carolina. But Notre Dame, they just don't have a strong schedule this year, and it doesn't help when you don't have a conference championship game. Moving on to the number 11 overall team, it is Alabama. Listen, Alabama's really talented, but they're very inconsistent. Jalen Milroe, not a great thrower of the football, really hasn't improved from last year in terms of throwing. Ryan Williams is obviously a beast. They've got a ridiculous amount of talent on defense, but it's just a very inconsistent team. Not a fun team to face if you're Texas in the first round. That is an SEC matchup right there, and then you do have Boise State. So you can take a look at SMU. SMU possibly could make it. So we'll go through this. You can see all these rankings right here. The matchups, Boise State traveling to Ohio State. It'd be very hard for Boise State. Ohio State would try and shut down Genty, obviously force Boise State to throw. Indiana travels on the road to Knoxville. Kind of an interesting matchup there. Bama and Texas. If I was the committee, and I know this is not something you should do, I would try and avoid in-conference matchups in round 1. I want to see out-of-conference matchups. And then Notre Dame taking on Penn State. So those are the overall rankings. The first team out would be SMU, and SMU's got a very manageable schedule. And SMU's been on a roll. We'll have to see what happens with them. And then Texas A&M, even after losing to South Carolina did they lose by 24 points to South Carolina? I mean, I don't know about that. But just taking a look at the teams in terms of their chances to make the playoff, I'd say Oregon's a virtual lock. Ohio State, after beating Penn State, is probably a lock. Even if they lose to Indiana, they would finish 10-2 with a win over Penn State on the road. You're going to make it. Miami sitting at 90%. I don't know what Miami's schedule is. What is this thing? I'm not even sure what this is. They could at least make this it's like some winged football goblin. This is an interesting game, Miami at Georgia Tech. I could see Georgia Tech winning this game, honestly. I could. Especially, Georgia Tech on campus. They'll crush Wake Forest. Wake Forest is terrible this year. And then Syracuse with McCord. Yeah, Syracuse was looking all right for a little bit, but Miami should go undefeated with that. They should go undefeated with that schedule, you would think. Maybe they lose one game. The thing is, if Miami loses one game and they lose in the conference championship, I don't think they'd be in. I don't know. It'd be probably not with all these SEC teams. Georgia, they go on the road to Ole Miss. I think they'll beat Ole Miss. They're slight underdogs here. I just think they'll be galvanized and they'll beat Ole Miss. Man, they've got a tough schedule. They get Tennessee at home. They'll be slight favorites, and then they get the rivalry game. That's an easy win against Georgia Tech. Indiana, we know they've got Michigan. They're heavy favorites in that game, 14-point favorites. They're going to be underdogs at Ohio State, and then they host Purdue. So that'll be a guaranteed win there against Purdue at the end of the season, you would think, for Indiana. But I think Indiana's probably going to make the playoff. I mean, I'm guessing this is what's going to happen. They're going to beat Michigan. They're going to lose to Ohio State. They're going to beat Purdue. Then they're not going to make the Big Ten championship because they have the tiebreaker loss with Ohio State, and they'll make the playoff at 11-1. That would be my guess. Texas, they host Florida. They're going to beat Florida at home. At Arkansas. Arkansas is an interesting team, but they should definitely win that game. And then that's an annoying rivalry game if you are Texas at A&M. If they lose to A&M, man, they do not have... They just don't have many good wins, Texas does. And if they lose to A&M, I don't know. I mean, because you beat Florida, you beat Arkansas. Both of those games they're not all that in terms of quality of win. It's not very good. I think Penn State has an easy schedule left. Washington, yeah, I thought people thought Washington was going to be a little bit better than this, but that's going to be a gimme game. I think that's their whiteout game. How about their whiteout game being on Peacock? Peacock is such a joke. It's funny when they cut to highlights with Peacock and it's just like there's this motion blur or whatever, this lag because it's being streamed. It's just pathetic. On the road Minnesota's not bad. Now Minnesota actually could beat them. Yeah, they seriously could. That's not a fun game for Penn State. That's going to be very cold too in Minneapolis. They get Maryland at home. Maryland's really fallen off. Boise State, we'll see how they finish. Nevada, yeah, so these are going to be wins. 94% chance, 88% chance, 90% chance. Yeah, Boise State very likely will make the playoff as the Group of 5 team. The only other argument you could say with Group of 5 would be Army. I mean, listen, if Army wins out, they have to make it, though, because they'd be undefeated with a win against Notre Dame. Well, I don't know, but I think they would. I mean, if they're undefeated, they beat Notre Dame in a neutral site affair. I think that's at the Commanders Field, that neutral site game. I don't know. No. The Army-Navy game's at the Commanders Stadium. Where is that? That's at Yankee Stadium. Yeah, they face Notre Dame at Yankee Stadium. Kind of a weird one. Ohio State plays at Wrigley Field in a few weeks. But, yeah, I mean, this is just... Listen, I think North Texas could beat them, honestly. They could. I mean, they got to definitely have a chance. But Navy is really trailed off. I think Army... That's going to be a close game, though. It's the rivalry. So this is a tough schedule for Army. I think Army ends up losing a game at least to Notre Dame. And it ends up being Boise State that makes it. They've got Tennessee at a 73% chance. We'll take a look at Tennessee. Tennessee, they're going to crush Mississippi State. They got that tough game at Georgia, and then they've got a game against Vanderbilt. Yeah, Tennessee's going to be a tough one because if they lose to Georgia in a very close game, it's going to be hard for them to make it, but it's a good loss. I mean, it is a really good loss if you lose by like 3 at Georgia. That's tough. And then the other 2 games are definitely going to win. Looking at BYU, can BYU win out at Utah? Yeah, they could beat Utah. Utah is just not very good this year. They get Kansas at home. Arizona State might beat them. This is a 50-50 game. Arizona State's had a solid year, and there's just so much parity. I think BYU will probably lose in the Big 12 championship if I had to guess to like an Iowa State. Let's look at Iowa State. At Kansas. They could lose to Kansas, honestly. Kansas is a lot better than their record. At Utah. Yeah, I mean, it's Iowa State has a tough schedule left. Kansas State, Utah, Kansas on the road. We'll have to see. But either way, guys, that's going to do it for this first update. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.